Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. I'm your host once again, Wayne Tuttle. Go to our website, www.legendsofsuperstitionmountains.com, for other material, archives, all kinds of stuff. It's where you can find the swag, the merchandise, anything you want there. Additionally, go down, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. That way you always hear any updates, any special videos, archival material we get coming out. Getting pretty quick at that. So let's get into this week, which I'm going to kind of give a little prologue. Is we've been working on digital archives over, there's the 15 boxes, there's 10 to 15,000 slides, negatives, and so forth. We're about a third through, so there's about 5,000 of those down. But we recently acquired, without getting into detail, approximately 5,000 files on treasure hunting. This is the Southwest, generally Arizona, New Mexico, California, but it also covers pretty much every place else: New Zealand, Japan, shipwrecks along the Atlantic coast. So it's several different collections from people, and I was very fortunate to acquire all this material, cabinets of material. We will kind of share with everyone specifically, or if we can ever put together some catalog of it. Right now, the lookup would be near impossible. Trevor's spending hours upon hours. I won't know where Trevor is. I'll go out in the garage and find Trevor in file cabinets going through. Do you know what this is? Do you know where this is? So it's a pretty cool thing. Kind of changed everything. And plus, as far as chasing legends, it means chasing legends, we can chase legends next to forever now. So we'll be going through a lot of that. Of course, we pulled the Lost Dutchman and a lot of Arizona files right off the bat and been going through stuff like that. And that's where some stories will come from, because I find them interesting. There's a lot of really cool material throughout these collections, and I'm not going to specifically say whose collections they are, but it's very, very interesting, and there's a lot of letters, and a lot of the letters, people tell stories. And I'm always fascinated with that, when it's the person talking about or telling about something, someone they meet, and specific certain things. So not always they're about treasures, but these are specifically, for the most part, about lost mines, treasures, and different types of things like that, shipwrecks. So this one we're going to go into this week, which is very cool. Was an individual. His name's Carl. A lot of them are hard to read. Some of them are typed out, but the signatures are really difficult. The gentleman that Carl meets, his name was Ben. Carl was camped around Whiskey Springs area, and this guy, Ben, comes up and shows up into his camp. Ben was very happy to come in there, get some coffee and stuff. I guess he'd run out of water wherever he'd been traveling. So they get into a conversation. And Carl's reckoning of this is that he was talking. He didn't want to say, "Did you find any gold?" anything like this. This is sometime in the mid-late 70s. And so politely he just said, "Hey, you ever seen anything interesting out here in the mountains?" Ben, who was a guy in his 60s, said, "Yeah, there's been a few things." But he said, "There's one thing I don't mind telling you about, if you got a few minutes." And he's like, "Yeah." He said, well, he'd been out north of there. He'd been out by Music Mountain. And he'd been searching around there, and one day he comes upon this little spot. And he said he looked over, and there was a little bush tree, and it was pretty warm out, so he thought he'd go over there and see if there was a spot he could kind of get a little shade off the tree. And what he was surprised to see is it kind of like was a drop down. It was actually a small tree growing in a lower area that it was kind of sticking up above this edge. So he kind of looked down, said it was 5 or 6 feet across both ways. And it was kind of encircled about 3/4, and then the tree had grown up through there. And he kind of was looking down, realized he could kind of climb down to it. It was about a 4 or 5 foot drop. And he could get under there, and there was a bit of shade. And there was room to kind of be able to sit back. And he said it wasn't probably a spot you could camp in or do much in, but he figured to get down there, get out of the sun for a while. Check it out. So he climbed down in, and he got in, and he's kind of realized everything was cool there, and it was an old ironwood tree, and he's sitting there and he's looking in the open spot of it faced east. And he said he looked over to his left, which would have been the north, and he saw there's an opening. And he said it was probably about 2.5 feet or so wide and about 2.5, 3 feet high. And there was a kind of a boulder ledge coming out. And he said he looked kind of like a cave, but it looked like it might have been kind of opened up. And he was kind of looking in there, and he thought he could see something back in there a ways. He said it went in a back a ways, but he didn't have a flashlight or anything. So he said he was looking in there, but he was too worried about rattlesnakes, or it could be a mountain lion or something back in there. So he kind of was looking and realized he didn't see any sign of anything, but he wasn't going to risk it. Figured I'll come back. So he said he left the mountains. About 3-4 weeks later, he comes back. Can't find it. And he's retracing his path, and he spends an entire day or two, and he can't find the spot. Said it took 3-4 times, nothing. 4th or 5th time he goes out, he said he just literally walked right back up on it, doing the same thing each time. And he said this time it was there. Everything looked exactly the same. He said he thought that was really weird. So he went over to check it out, but he had a flashlight this time. He got back in there and he starts going in. And he said, I'm looking at the opening, and I'm kind of looking at it. And he said, I was very cautious, very worried because of what might be in there. He said, I start looking at it. He says, I look back, and about 8-9 feet back, I can see a box. And he says, it looks like it's wood. And he says it has straight edges on it. So he said he got very excited. Figured someone had done something or stashed something in there. And he said he never saw any signs in the area of anyone who had had a fire or anything like that. So he thought, man, this is some sort of stash place. I don't know of anything like this. So he started to work his way back in and got back there with the flashlight. And he says, you wouldn't believe what I found. And this guy, Carl's just like, wait. And Carl says the guy got a kind of faraway look and got quiet for a minute or so. And he said, I looked at it and I suddenly realized it was this old cuckoo clock. And Carl said, guy just had that weirdest look on his face. He said it, and he says it was this old wooden cuckoo clock. He said it was about 1.5 feet by about 1 foot. And he said, but it was very old. And he said it was in just really bad condition sitting there. And he realized if he tried to mess with it or do anything with it, it might fall apart. So he didn't touch it or anything. He looked around. There's nothing else in there, just this cuckoo clock laying there. And it was laying on its back. So he scooted himself out and thought about it. Couldn't figure it out. Why is there a cuckoo clock in the middle of the Superstition? Said he left. He got a friend, and they came back out. He said it took us a couple tries when we were up there for a couple days before I found the spot again. He said it was really weird. You go out, and it was like I couldn't find it, and I kept going back over the same spot. And he said that I guess I would just be 7-8 feet, just a little different, and then I'd see it, and I'd see that tree. So I went down in there, looked at it. My buddy went down. He said he looked at it, said if we touch that thing's just going to fall apart. He said it's just a cuckoo clock. He said, okay, so I'm not crazy. And his buddy said, no, it looks like it's really old. It's been there a long time. So Carl said, the guy gave him directions, said go up here, and there was no map with any of this or anything. It was just kind of general. He said, told me go north up Music Mountain around the south side and go up, and as I came around to the east side, I would find this spot and all this. Not really great directions, but who knows, but the preservation. The funny thing was, when I read this story, I kept thinking I'd heard this story about the Cuckoo Clock Cave or Cuckoo Clock Mine or something like that. And I started going through and looking for some stuff, and I can't find anything on it. And I don't know if Tom Collenborn or someone like that had told a story. I looked in Collenborn's Chronicles. I didn't see it. So I wasn't sure if this has been a story that had been picked up by someone else or something. But I always find that intriguing and strange because I've had those things happen to me in the mountains where you find something and it may not be exceptionally valuable, but it's just so odd that you're like, why would someone bring deep that far in the mountains off the beaten path a cuckoo clock? and just leave it there. Why would a guy just make up a story like that? Because the guy said, and he told the guy, you know, if you ever want to go up there, if you ever find this, if you see the ironwood tree and all this, drop down in there. I'm sure it's still there. He says, I doubt very many people would ever run across that. So probably today, somewhere up there on Music Mountain, there is this little opening, cave, mine, whatever it is, and you get back in there about 7-8 feet, and you're going to see a cuckoo clock laying there probably still. Leave it if you find it. Take a picture now so we can run it all to us, because that would be the coolest thing to tell the Chasing Legends. Find it in an old file. Someone goes back, finds the spot, takes a picture of the old cuckoo clock, and we all sit there and go, wow, that's pretty crazy. It's still there. But I would leave it if I was anybody else. So that's one out of the archives, because now we have truly an archive of archives. And like I said, we have letters, manuscripts, all kinds of stuff that is just sitting there, and we've barely nudged it. We pulled out the Arizona, New Mexico, California files, started going through some of that, finding stories and certain treasure stories we're familiar with, and started looking at what was in those files. But as interesting as that is, there's stuff all over the place, and I'm going to try to get it cataloged to share as we share some really cool adventures and stories of other people. And additionally adding into that, hopefully be able to do lookups for people sometime, someday. So don't send anything our way yet, because we have no idea. It is literally just, we're buried in files right now. And we're just kind of, like I said, barely kind of going through and having to go realize the labels. A lot of things are falling apart. So we're trying to preserve and then recatalog and get things better organized. So there you go. I hope everybody's enjoying this week's Chasing Legends and the heat, because it was 102 today. So the temperature's all picking up. Good time of the year to be able to go through all these files and organizing stuff and all that for the summer, because it'll be a very interesting summer, and by the end of the summer with everything I got going on. Looking forward to, we were just working the other day on music to finish off Sunsets for release this fall. So looking forward to that. We were pretty unhappy with the first music that it went into the film festivals with. We went to re-record, and of course, perfectionist that I am, I think Trevor was pretty happy with what we were doing. And then I turned around and did not like the way everything was sounding and wanted to go for much more of a digital dry bass recording. So we're actually going back and going to start re-recording, and I'm going to let him listen to both sides of what we do and see what he thinks. But I have a feeling we'll end up with something really cool. Music's not supposed to take all the precedence in the film, but I always think it's a very important thing, and if it's going to have my name on it, it's got to be done right. So there you go, Chasing Legends. I hope everybody's just enjoying their summer as time kicks off. They enjoyed their Memorial Day. We're coming up, heading towards the 4th of July. I wish you all well, and for all, remember, I'm Wayne Tuttle, you're not, and of course this was Chasing Legends.